Welcome to Prime Life. We call it Retirement 2.0. Leave each episode with tips and new ideas to help you navigate retirement in our new age. It's your time. Make it count.
This podcast is for educational purposes only. It is not intended as medical, investment, or financial advice. We do not sponsor or endorse any of the individuals, companies, products, or services featured on this podcast. Any statements or opinions expressed are of the individual who makes them. We hope you enjoy the episode.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Prime Life podcast. I'm Mary Crean, and I'm here with my co-host, Joseph Katz. Joseph, how are you today?
Mary, doing great. Thanks for being here with me.
So I hear we have a really interesting guest that I would love for you to introduce.
All our guests are interesting, but I am excited to do the introduction. So welcome to Prime Life, April Goff Brown. She left a 35-year career in 2017 and shifted her life to be one where she is in control. She now is a certified human design specialist, a life coach, and author of 2 books. April, welcome to the show. Let's fill in some of those gaps of what that introduction is all about.
Well, thank you. I'm really happy to be here, Mary and Joseph. So I did spend 35 years working in the youth development arena for local government. I did work for state government, for foundations, and I actually designed and managed programs and wrote grants for all of that time. But in 2017, the funding was changing, and I decided, well, I hit 65. It was time to stop and try something new. So I retired from that work in 2017 and said, okay, I'm not going to do any helping anymore. I'm done. I've helped forever. It's time to change. So I started off making jewelry. I had a jewelry design business years past. And I was also doing art quilts, and I was selling those as well. And while it was wonderful, after COVID hit, the market for all of that kind of waned because our priorities were somewhere else. So I used that time to not only be the lead for my granddaughter's education, but I also decided I wrote a children's book. I was interested in yoga, so I went to online yoga classes and got certified. I decided I was interested in oracle cards. I got certified in that. And then I found human design, and that seemed to be the last thing that I hit on. And it was like the missing piece for everything that I wanted to do all along. So I'm back in the helping profession, but in a whole different way and at my pace and on my schedule.
So that's a lot. And I want to say, too, to be transparent, I've been following April's career over Facebook, and we have a lot of mutual friends. And that's why I said, I reached out to April because I really wanted to hear more of her story. So that's wonderful. But my question is, can you talk a little bit about what human design is? Because I love human design, but I'm not sure I really know what it is. And I know our audience would be super excited to hear about that.
Sure. So human design is a tool, and it's a synthesis of some ancient practices such as the Chinese I Ching, chakra system, astrology, and each of us, what human design says is each of us is born with a unique design. And it comes from the time and date and place of our birth. So that's where some of the astrology piece comes in. And from that information, you are given a blueprint, or you're shown what your blueprint is. That is a wonderful roadmap for how you are meant to be in this world. And so there are 5 types, which most people are of one of the generator types. I happen to be one of the 20% that are projectors and are here to guide. That's the role of projectors. So it's really fascinating because every time I've done a reading for somebody, it fascinates me is how accurate it is. And it can pinpoint your gifts and your strengths, but it also can pinpoint areas where you struggle and provide strategies to help overcome those struggles.
As you were describing that model, I was thinking of the Myers-Briggs personality test, right? There's probably a lot of
Well,
similarities.
I did that years ago in the 90s that I did get certified in that too. Um, and there is and there isn't. Where we talk about in the Myers-Briggs, for instance, the extroversion and introversion, in human design, there are profiles that are more extroverted than others. And I happen to be on the introverted hermit side where I really love and need my alone time in order to regroup and build my energy. So I think what helps with the human design part is it helps you understand that this is your energy. Just like somebody with extroversion needs to be around people. And if they are not, then they get antsy, they don't know what to do. But the interesting thing with those with that profile is that you can get burnt out from too much people time. So it's learning how to balance that. So I'm glad you brought that up because I love Myers-Briggs as well.
So we need to talk after this episode because I was kind of thinking about what you just said. You're absolutely right about extroverts. I happen to be one of them, and when you need energy from people, but you were talking about energy and all of that. And so, can you talk a little bit more about what that really means? People's
Sure.
energy, like what does that really mean, and how does that play into the work that you're doing?
And we'll get that answer after a brief word from our commercial sponsors.
NASA is always working harder to be your carrier of choice. We offer insurance products that can help you meet your retirement goals, such as protecting your savings, securing lifetime income, or paying for healthcare costs. We're dedicated to providing best-in-class service and are keeping things simple, and we'll have your back. We have around 400,000 policyholders and contract holders and have been doing this for a long time, 170 years. But we remain humble enough to always try to improve. For more information, visit nfg.com. Nassau Insurance products are issued by Nassau Life and Annuity Company of Hartford, Connecticut, Nassau Life Insurance Company, East Greenbush, New York, or Nassau Life Insurance Company of Kansas, Overland Park, Kansas. Subsidiaries of Nassau Financial Group, products are not available in all areas. Policyholder counts are for all Nassau companies as of September 30th, 2022, and are subject to change.
Okay, so the way I look at energy is that when we are in alignment with our design and how we're meant to be, that life flows better, that we feel better because we're not constantly battling ourselves. So, for example, I said when I retired, I didn't want to do helping anymore. Well, what I learned about my design is that the theme of caring and nurturing others is throughout my design. So I can't get away from it. I have to find a way to use it in a way that also works. And one of the key things about mine is that and it's something that I found I said a lot to people over the years, but is really a key part of me, is you can't be good for yourself, for others, if you're not good for yourself. And so it's about how do you balance the nurturing yourself while you're nurturing other people. And I think that's where the energy is that how do you, human design actually gives us permission to care for ourselves and put ourselves first. And we don't hear that too often. So that there is the balance, because if we are good and can love ourselves fully, we can give to others in a way that is nurturing for both. I hope that helps.
So when you did your introduction, after I read your introduction, you gave a little bit more. You went through, I think it was 4 or 5, maybe 6 different things you did post your career. So, that's sort of the lifelong learning, self-development, put whatever title you want on that. And, for the audience that we're talking to, mostly people who are 55 plus, maybe you could just discuss why you thought that was important for you, and where there might be value to others to continue to improve their lives in one way or another, and tie it into all the work that you're doing.
Sure. And it's a great question. For me, my life wasn't over yet. And I've heard how, and I'm sure we all heard, when people end up retiring, they don't know what to do with themselves. And so as I knew I was going to retire, it's okay, what do I want to explore? I now have time. And I think that's the thing, is that we've gone through the heavy career work. Our kids hopefully are grown and out of the house if we have kids. And so now there's time for you. And the idea of exploring things and to see, what do I want to try? I've always been interested in something. I was interested in art. And then when I started the art quilts, it taught me how to look at things differently and see differently. And that was a real valuable thing. So I think what I would suggest to others is that here you've got some freedom and some time to focus on things you've always wanted to do and never made time for. And that to me was very energizing, and it felt fabulous.
So, April, I know you're also an author and you've written a couple of books. And so, where I'm going with this is, before you talk a little bit about your books, which I'd love for our audience to hear, I don't know, Joseph, about you, but I would be like, I don't know if I could really write a book. Like, I'm not a great writer. I'm not a bad writer, but like, that takes a lot of courage to say, I'm going to write a book and get it published and whatnot. So I'd love to hear about, why you wrote the book and how you decided, or how you got that courage to because sometimes when we try new things, we're not really that good at it.
Right.
And so how did you decide, and how did you deal with that? And then if you want to also talk a little bit about your books, we'd love to hear.
Sure. I always liked writing, and a lot of my professional career was in writing. But that wasn't the reason. My now 20-year-old granddaughter, when she was around 7 or 8, she one day asked me a question after she was here for a week. She goes, "Nana, when I'm not here, do you forget about me?" And I was blown away with the question and how to respond to that. That question stayed with me for 8 years. And I knew I'd write something one day, but I tried and I just couldn't get anywhere. So in 2020, I think it was, or 21, I attended a day-long event run by a woman here in Connecticut, down in Essex. And at the end of the day, we were to write a note to ourselves about what our big, bold move would be for the next year. And I said, I'm going to write my children's book. I put it in the envelope and sealed it, and that was it. And sure enough, it flowed. And the book just came, and I found a hybrid publisher to help me with the illustrations, because it is a children's picture book. And when I look at it now, it's a love story between a grandparent and grandchild. That answers the question of, "Nana, when I'm not here, do you forget about me?" And of course, the answer is no, that would never be the case. And explaining where Nana in the book explains to the child that I hug you in my heart. And so you're always there. So, and that's the name of the book, I Hug You in My Heart. So it was a labor of love. The first copy went to that granddaughter and she doesn't remember asking the question.
Yeah. Yes. So I'm gonna put a pause on this. I'm just gonna stop our recording.
Okay. And so my next book is completely different. And the process was very different. As part of my study in human design, I decided to spend a year learning about the 64 gates. The sun transits through the gates every 6 days. So I took the time to learn about each gate. I wrote everything down because nothing stays in my head. And after doing this for about 9 or 10 months, I looked and I said, oh, I have a book. And so once again, I started writing, compiling it into some format and gave it to a few people to look at. And so that book was actually self-published this past April, and it's called Journey to Yourself. And it's not one word, yourself, it's your self as a second word. Unlock the gates of human design and awaken your inner wisdom. So it's an area in human design that most people don't get to. They stop at the very basics. And I found there was just such wisdom for living inside the gates that I knew I wanted to write that book. And it's really a book about with reflection questions so that once you've read the gate, how do you apply that to your life?
Well, congratulations on writing 2 books. Most people don't write one. You wrote 2, so that's amazing. When you were describing your granddaughter's question, it's a very deep question when you think about it for a young child to ask. It's
Right.
like if a tree falls in the woods kind of a thing.
Yeah.
So that was a beautiful story. I want, you talked about writing down your goal of writing a book, and I know part of what you do now is sort of life coaching. Maybe you could talk a little bit about the importance, at least for you, of setting goals in order to achieve them, and any other tips you have, from your life coaching.
Right. Yeah, I think the trick is to not set a lot of them. Because when I set a lot of them, I find that I have little pieces of paper all over my goal door, and then I run through them to remove them. So it's more like ideas. Um, but I think what's helpful is even with I'm going to study yoga. I didn't know if I'd ever teach it, but I learned enough that it helps me. And so I have a yoga practice that works for me with my limitations as well. So I think by whether we want to use the word goal, and I know that's often in business, but a desire, a want, um, and to know that it is achievable in some way, shape, or form. It is achievable as you start to explore it more. So, I never sat down and said, well, I'm going to just write a series of books. Both of those, as I described, they just happened in some way and fell in. I have a third one mulling over in my head, and I know that that will come out next year. But I'm not ready to sit down and write yet because most of it happens up here before I get to the keyboard. But I think by setting a goal and striving for something will keep us young because we're always then, as you said, a lifelong learning. And I'm a firm believer in that. It keeps us moving and growing and keeps our mind agile. And that is the most important thing is I need this mind to stay awake and just open for things.
Yeah, we've had many guests on, and they've said that exact thing that you just said, April, that, part of living longer, living better is learning and reading and doing puzzles and, doing lots of things, but also learning new things no matter what. And I'm really interested to ask you, how did your family and friends react to this almost new you, even though you've been, you've had like this, like you said, you've always been a helper, you've always wanted to do great work in the community. But how did others react to you when they saw you, the jewelry business and writing the books and the human design and all of that stuff?
Um, my husband is my biggest cheerleader. So we've been together for 47 years and we've been each other's biggest cheerleaders. So he keeps saying, well, it's his turn to be cheering me on. So anything that I've wanted to do, he just says, go for it, go for it, go for it. And my family, it's been interesting is that not everybody understands what I'm doing. And so they're very silent on it. I have one sister that, yes, she loves and she's learning. But I think what was freeing is that learning design is that I'm finally able to be who I am. I don't have to hide me anymore. And it shows up in the way that I dress and the way that I conduct myself. And it actually has opened me up to others. I don't lecture anybody on anything. It's, if you want to know, I'll happy to share it with you. If not, we can talk about all kinds of other stuff that we always talked about before. So it's not big difference. Fortunately, those that I'm close to, and I've gained some new wonderful friends and colleagues, and they have been supportive. So the circle changes a little bit, and you find people who are of like mind with you, and it allows you to keep on going, even with other people don't, because I firmly believe people enter our lives for a period of time, and it might be short and it might be long. And so I just move and evolve with that.
I know I keep going back to the intro, but like I said, there's so much to unpack. You talked about being in control. We're getting close to the end of our recording here. So maybe you could give our listeners a tip or two about how you can add control into your own life. Like you did it one way. Well, maybe there's some tips that you can share.
I think first is to recognize and acknowledge that you do have some freedom to make choices, that you may have spent most of your adult life, I know I certainly did, doing what was expected of you. And I think when you start to look at what do I want, and you have freedom to choose, that's the big thing. That's what I mean by control, is we have freedom to choose how we want to be for the rest of our lives, because life hasn't ended. I keep telling people I tend to live to be 100. So I've got a good 28 years to go.
We had a guy on the show, I forgot his name. He had actually calculated when he expects to live to. So yeah. People are going to live longer than are the previous generation. So
absolutely.
We're rooting for you with your husband. We're rooting for you.
Thank you.
We are. And we know you're going to do it.
Yeah.
So our last question that we'd love to ask you is, especially with you, April, you've done so many things. You can do anything you want. As you said, like we realize we have choices. Why do you get up every day and do what you do? What's your why?
It feels good. It really feels good to be able to contribute and to know that I've always wanted to be helpful. And that's what it is that when I can talk with somebody and I can see the light bulb go off or that aha, and it's like, oh, that's what it is. That feels great for them, but it feels really satisfying to me. So that's my why.
I love that.
Satisfaction. Who doesn't want that?
Yeah.
So April, what's the best way for someone to get in touch with you to talk about any of these topics in more detail or to explore any of the things you can help them with?
I think the easiest is to go through my website, because there is a schedule with April form that anybody could contact me. And so it is my name. So it's aprilgoffbrown.com. And if they scroll down, you'll see a schedule, and there is a place to get a complimentary call. And I'd love to talk with people about, whatever. It would be wonderful to hear from folks.
Excellent. Then we'll definitely put that in the show notes, along with any of your social media handles as well.
Thank you.
So I'm going to pass the back to Mary.
Oh, thank you, Joseph. April, thank you for joining us. It's been really great. We'll have to have you back another time to hear about your third book, which I'm excited to learn about. I know it's still in your head, so we don't want to, we don't want you to have to share that. But it was great having you, Joseph. As always, it's a pleasure spending time with you. And to our listeners, please join us next time on the Prime Life podcast. And don't forget to like us, give us feedback. We'd love to hear from you. Everyone have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much.
Remember to subscribe to the Prime Life podcast anywhere you find podcasts. You can find all of our episodes, contact information, and more on our website, primelifepodcast.com. Stay connected with us. Follow us on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok.